welcome to the very, very, very final episode of the Gaming Hall of Rivalries. I am your host, Jeremy Evans, along with, sadly, the last time, for now, we got other projects, but for this one, the last time, as my co-host, Curtis Scism. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Curtis, we are now in the final episode for the listeners, and I want to say it's been a really, really fun journey. We started this show, I want to say, in June. I think we were talking about it in May. Maybe we started in the middle, late May.
Yes.
Early June, probably, when we started the in-game boss program and everything. And this was one of the first flagships, and this is the first one to come to an end. We were planning for these many episodes, and we did our research and tried to pick the ones that were the right characters going into this rivalry and everything. And I thought, all the picks that we did were really good in their own way. Some were, some were created by one person. Some of them were just so iconic. Some of them were like unique in their own way. Like, the two princes, like Princess Zelda and Princess Toadstool. We talked about the espionage. We talked about the monsters. We talked about Galaxy Heroes. We talked about the most badass characters. It's been quite a roller coaster of like just fun knowledge going in the learning research.
It's been a major variety of characters.
Yes. And sadly, it is coming to an end, but good things do come to an end, and I think this is a really good package. And if you're listening to this final episode, I recommend you maybe go from here and work your way backwards to the first episode, because there's a lot of information about each character, and our goal was to be an information show, to talk about really want to talk about what made them the rivals and how that influenced the gaming culture. Not so much of like who was better, you know what I mean?
It's more of a, why are they so loved by the video game community? Why are they so memorable too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but let's talk about our journey through this thing. So, Curtis, how about you tell me from the beginning of this to now, how did you feel about this whole journey? Like, from the podcasting, talking about these games, doing research, what was all that for you?
Going back from my first two appearances with Jeremy and John, this show derived from two appearances that I had on that prior podcast, where we actually compared Mario and Sonic. And, Jeremy emails me in the summer last year or late spring. He's like, hey, I want to do what we did there, but make it a whole series long. I was like, oh, that's kick-ass, man. I loved that. That was a very good opportunity. And so, true story, Jeremy emails me the list. I'm nodding my head like, and I'm reading it up late. I'm playing games myself around 12:30. I sent Jeremy this text 1 a.m. out of the blue saying, hey, let's throw Joe and Ellie and Lee and Clementine on.
Yes, you actually submitted one of your rivalry picks, and so that was a good choice. I never really thought of putting those two characters together.
And it was neat too, because Jeremy is so objective. What's fun with co-hosting with Jeremy is we say eye to eye on a lot of things, but sometimes, he has a different preferences than I do. I have my different preferences, but it's so neat to have that back and forth with someone that I've known Jeremy since high school. Yeah. And it's always been great. Yeah. But yeah, it's been great to, Jeremy's like, man, I didn't think of that. Okay, why are these guys rivals? Why is Joe and Ellie and Lee and Clementine rivals? I actually typed out what was like a paragraph.
Yeah. And it was really cool because like there were characters on that list that you were excited to talk about, like Nathan Drake. Like, oh, okay, yeah, Nathan Drake and
yep.
Yeah, all these characters. Like, okay, this is awesome because if you really think about listening to the show, you take the most iconic character, for example, Mario, and we think about who was the character trying to take that throne, and that's where the rivalry starts. Yes. So you'll hear one iconic character, then you'll hear a character maybe you didn't know, like, oh, okay, I forgot about this character. I guess that makes sense because no other character you could think of tried to take that throne.
I'll use the Master Chief and Samus episode because on face value you're just comparing two Space Marines. When you look at the production release dates of the games releasing one after another, like trying to literally compete with each other, Nintendo and Microsoft at that time, it's like, okay, that is much more deeper than the surface on competition.
Right.
And rivalry in that sense.
And it was funny too because like the rivalry of the releases was the highlight of that more than like, what they have done in space, because they're totally two different galaxies.
Yes.
Yeah. But it was just so interesting that rivalry sometimes can be rival just by releasing how the way the games are being released, or just the way that certain games have crossed over each other to make jokes, like Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter.
Yes,
that were rivalry in house. Trying to take the throne of the iconic.
I think one of my favorite ones was the Bayonetta and Dante, where they're both from the same creator.
Yes.
And you're just thinking, I'm going to outthink myself from a year ago. I'm going to make something even better now.
Right, especially a person like him that left Clover Studios at Capcom to create his own, and he knew that, well, I can't use Dante anymore. I'll make my own.
And it's gonna be better,
right? And then you get that rivalry starting there. So it's been so much interesting. Now I'm pretty sure there was probably been more if we dug a little bit deeper, but I think it's better we just pick what we thought was the best. Because honestly, I was thinking between here's a couple of picks I was thinking, but after talking about it didn't work out, I was thinking about Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong with Banjo-Kazooie, but they were totally too different that it just wouldn't work. I was thinking about doing the group from Final Fight and Streets of Rage, but it was a little bit too challenging about it because there were so many buddy fights, and I couldn't figure out which one would be the best for them and everything like that. And so, but when you brought your pick to it, I think that was the one that kind of complete the whole package. And everything like that. The one thing interesting about this show is at the end of the show, we always talk about what the future of these characters. What do we want to see for them? Do we want to see them keep going? Do we think their story has ended? Et cetera, et cetera. And, some of them, going back, listen to them, some of them I agree. Some of them, it's funny to listen back to them. And then now we're at the point of seeing maybe some characters got some news.
Yes.
Because we talked, you can look at, Devil May Cry got announced, but we recorded before that. So now our choices in that one is totally different from what we saw there.
On a similar note, I got a Twitter message. Why didn't you guys do Batman and Spider-Man? And, what's funny is at that time that I sent the email to Jeremy about Joe and Ellie, Spider-Man and Batman was on there before Spider-Man PS4 even came out. But at the same time, Jeremy brought up a good point of, it might go the wrong direction, and because at that time Spider-Man did not have anything that rivaled the Arkham series,
right?
At that sense, and with the eclipse of Spider-Man PS4, now that argument, hence the message I got on Twitter,
right?
It's like, oh man, I know, man,
right? And also in the defense, it's funny because you're right, because they mentioned on the PS4, so now that rivalry can finally start, and it just came too late.
And what's funny too is it almost is a rivalry because that was DC's flagship for video game titles was Batman. Even before Arkham Asylum, it was the Batman on the NES. Batman Returns was a side-scrolling beat 'em up. Batman Forever was a reskin Mortal Kombat. The Spider-Man had a lot of titles on the Nintendo, so it almost could have. But when you look at Arkham, it's Spider-Man has nothing on that Arkham game,
right?
And that's just hard to get Spider-Man. Because if you think about it, the last time Spider-Man had anything relevant on the next gen was 2 really bad movie license games, and it just did not hold a candle to Batman.
Right. I guess the rivalry they have was they had a very long bad streak of games. Yes. You could say that, but I also wanted to have Spider-Man go a little bit further out. Let's see a sequel, let's see a third one, and then rival that. Yeah, because the Batman, I think after Arkham Knight, I think that particular story is shut, it's done. And if a new Batman comes, I don't think it's going to be in relation to that one. And I want that to be the same thing with Spider-Man.
So a question, Jeremy. If Insomniac ever does release a Spider-Man 2, would you be willing to do a Batman Spider-Man?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
That would be fun.
It could be something maybe like a podcast special, hey, Secret Level Plus or something like that, or maybe on the In-Game Boss podcast. Is just we'll just have to sit back and see what happens. Yeah, and who knows? Maybe some more might pop up, and we might add maybe a couple more to the library of this show. So it's kind of like the show ended, but it can still be added on if something cool comes along and everything like that. But we would love to have the listeners' support. So, don't be afraid to email us and let us know.
DLC.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But, if you guys, listeners, are listening to this episode and you have ideas and suggestions and stuff, please throw them at us, and we might look at them and say, hey, maybe it's now the time to talk about this. Because, like I said, too, there's a lot of rivalry out there. The problem is there's just not enough material sometimes for these characters to sit there and talk about it. And so, but let's get into what this show about. Like I said, we pick two characters that rival each other, and we find out why they rival each other, and then what they do for the industry and everything. But at the end of the show, we always talk about what is the future of these characters. This last episode, we out of all the characters in the rivalry ones, you know, we did these characters in certain orders. When Curtis and I got together, you know, I had it a certain way, but then he wanted to insert his character, so I had to put this in the right order to really balance it out.
But the end goal was always ending on this pair.
Yes. Because, you know, we didn't want to put the big ones in the beginning. We wanted to split, like, here, we want to put the ones you are well known and some you didn't well know, like the Toes and Moogles. That's probably one of my favorite episodes because those are two characters that people forget that actually did a lot and no one really noticed. So that was something I want to put in the forefront. And then your big stuff will come at the end, you know, like, you know, Dante, Bayonetta, the Mont Tyrant, and, you know, the Pyramid Head. That was another one that, you know, I never thought I would put together. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
and Toad was another one.
Yeah. And so this one, though, when we did this list, we were like, I think out of all the ones that we've done, this is the biggest rivalry, probably as I can remember in gaming history.
Yes.
There was such a huge split, a huge culture, and it's been around me ever since growing up.
In the same community, too.
Yes. Even through a time in school, like I met secret people that would talk about this.
And I'm not just talking about the video game community. I'm like literally the same studio community, like fans of the studio.
Yeah. And so, but these two rivalries are actually from the same game, same series. And the funny thing about this game is one was the swan song of a console that was ending, and one was the beginning of a console coming out for the first time.
Yes.
And these two games are so iconic is that I wanted to make time. Actually, to tell you the truth, I wanted to make time to play this game, but I've been so busy, and I'm very sad that I haven't got a chance to play this game and really come in and talk about it real hardcore. We were trying to plan to have a guest on the show. It didn't work out due to scheduling, but regardless, the two characters we're talking about is Kefka, Palazzo, and yours is
Sephiroth.
And you know, it's funny. He's a share. He's a share. He just doesn't have a last name. And these two characters are from Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII. And like I said, like you had one game that ended the SNES era with a mega hit.
Yes.
And then you had Final Fantasy VII that came on the rise of going into the first 3D game for Final Fantasy with something dark. They're both dark in their own way. Yes. Tragedy, deep, sorrow, tragic in their own way. One character, as Richard Taplin tells me, one character is just straight evil, and the other character just needed a hug. He just needed a hug. And so, but before we even get into those two characters, we want to talk about why they are so rivals in the first place. So, Curtis, I know that you had some stuff to talk about in the culture of the split and everything like that. So, what do you go ahead and tell me your thoughts on it?
It is amazing because a lot of the Nintendo players jumped ship to PlayStation. So there was a split in the community because of the consoles too. And 6 was when you really don't tend to buy a lot of games at the end of a cycle from in my opinion. There are some outliners like Red Dead 2, Spider-Man recently, but the sales numbers for 6, and let me pull out some fact, from 2000 up to 2003, there was 3.48 million copies sold. Now you compare that to Final Fantasy VII, its sales figures by 2005, so give 2 more years, 9.8 million copies sold, both digital and physical.
Is that as we speak now?
But that was as of those 2 years.
Okay.
As of we speak right now, the difference is by 3 million.
Okay.
Let's see. 13,108,000 copies as of 2016 for 7. 10,177,600 copies sold.
And one of those things too is and this is very true that Final Fantasy VII has been ported more than 6. 6 I think stopped at the Game Boy Advance, I believe, and we haven't really, and they've been on the phone, but we haven't seen it like being brought up again. Like it's not even on the Switch out of that Final Fantasy package they announced recently.
To Square's own admission, the first 3 days of release in Japan, it sold over 2 million copies in 3 days. That's huge back then in Japan, and that sold consoles too. And Square even admits like the enthusiasm for 7 really opened the doors for them too. Right. And in the fan base too, you had a completely different art style going into 7. It went away from the gorgeously illustrations from 6 and before. So I'll use my own personal example. There can be a drop off from title to title to title of Final Fantasy. I loved 7. I enjoyed 8. I look at the cover of Final Fantasy 9 and the art direction it went. I was like, no, I'm not playing as a furry.
All right.
And that's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean is like, you know, you go from a very magical based world in 6 to a more industrial revolutionized world in 7. That kind of could turn off a fan base going away from one system to another. Yeah,
and especially you're going from fantasy to a sci-fi.
Yes.
And so one of the things I noticed growing up was there was always been a split between 6 and 7 because you like during our time Memorial there was like I don't want to say there was a secret society, but there was like this secret vibe from everybody else. Like were you a team 6 or were you a team 7 going through our high school years? And people would talk about 6 is so much better because the villain himself made 6.
Yeah.
And then they said 7 is so good because the villain itself made 7. And the fact that you know the villains themselves were more iconic than your main characters. Don't get me wrong, Cloud is popular. You know, Zack, Tifa, all of them. Let's be honest here. 7's main cast is more popular than 6's cast.
As iconic as Cloud is, I can make an argument for Terra and her story being a little bit more interesting. And I love Cloud. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, that's right there is kind of that split right there. And you kind of look at 7 like 7 learned a lot from 6.
It had to. It had to. Yes. The only difference is with the story of 6, which I'm not going to like ruin it for you, but the fact that you saw something going into a disaster, and in 7 you're already starting out with a disaster.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Yeah. For like for instance, like in 7, like you're going into this world that's already like, what happened? And in 6 was more of like you're seeing a build up to something. It almost feels like that you could connect those two in some way, right? Like 7 picks up where 6 left off, kind of feel. And so, yeah. So, but with the culture of people who are saying from 6, you were mentioning earlier, like there's people that were Final Fantasy 6 fans would not step into 7.
I have a friend at work named Cameron, and he jokes all the time of, oh, why don't you play the good Final Fantasies? I'm here on Dissidia playing the Final Fantasy 7 music stages on Dissidia. He's like, oh, that's from the bad game. I was like, come on. Oh, leave that alone.
So Curtis, in your opinion, why do you think people that play 6 bash on 7 or don't care to play 7? Do you think they compare too hard to 6?
I think so.
And what do you think is the comparison of that? Is it because there's the story? Is it because of they're not pushing that envelope as 6 does on evil, or what's your view of that?
I think Kefka is such a memorable villain to. I think let's see. Let me try to form my opinion.
Do you think Sephiroth? Do you think people think that the character Sephiroth did not hit that bar up high as Kefka did? As a villain. Okay.
And see, what you got to understand too. Back in 1997, Final Fantasy VII was a lot of people's first Final Fantasy game.
Yep.
And I think that built up the popularity of that too. Like it birthed its own community in 1997 and its release. I was one of those. Jeremy and I were talking about this, and this goes back to a old quote from Matt Pat, the game theorist, that your first Final Fantasy you play is your favorite.
Yeah.
And I have friends that are like, what's your favorite Final Fantasy? Mine's Final Fantasy X. And I'll ask them, was that the first one that you played? and they'll be like, yes, or you ask them which one is your favorite, and if you follow it up like, was that the first one you played? I think more times than not, they're gonna say yes, that was the first one I played.
I am guilty. I am one of the few. 9 was the first one I ever played. 9 was my favorite, and then 12 came along. Then 12 became my favorite. But you are right. Like 9 was my first love at first because it was my favorite one, and at that time, it felt like a real fantasy. It felt like, compared to everybody saying, it felt like 9 was going back to what the fantasy was, because 8 was kind of stuck in the middle between 7 and another fantasy thing. And so, but 12 then just took that away from me. But you are right. You know, it's your first love. It's the first game that you got into, first investment and everything like that. I think one of the huge difference between the other two, why people don't play 7, is because the fact that it didn't support Nintendo going back. This was a huge difference because Square Enix just decided to go with PlayStation.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people maybe felt betrayed too, that the fact that like you're...
So part of that too was the horsepower of the N64. It was not up to what Square Enix wanted. When you're going to go from a 3-disc video game to a 7 to 8 N64 cartridges to play your game, I think the choice is pretty clear which game you're gonna
right, because there was a cancel Final Fantasy on the 64.
And if you notice too, I think that rivalry between Square and Sony really cuts deep. I had a theory back in business school that I wrote a paper on. I had no fact about it. This was all substance situational evidence, substantial evidence. Because after Final Fantasy jumped ship from the Nintendo license, Dragon Quest also jumped ship to Sony as well.
Because they were both owned
for the longest time.
Yeah, because they're both owned by Square. I think Square just jumped ship regardless.
So, and then all of a sudden, Sony's the exclusive license. It has the exclusive license for Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy 13 comes out on multi-platform. What happens months after that? Sony unloads all sorts of stock from Squaresoft or Square Enix. And if you actually do some research, the Japanese hold grudges even amongst their own companies. There are some nasty feuds between companies. It was like a complete backstab of, hey, this is our exclusive thing. Why are you... Oh, you're going to go on to Microsoft with your game? Well, we're going to sell your stock.
Right. I think, and it's interesting too, because those two particular games also create the rival between Nintendo and PlayStation. And, you know, Team Nintendo, I was one of those. I was not going to get a PlayStation. I was Team Nintendo, so I waited for the 64. And so I didn't get a chance to get my hands on Final Fantasy VII when I first went through it. But I did go back and play it. And it's tough because I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I was telling him that, you know, it's different when you're going into a game for the first moment than going back to it. So, like, when you skip something and go back to it, I'm not getting that feeling that you had when you first touched it.
Yeah.
Because you were in the moment. I wasn't in the moment. And so it's totally different. It's like it's a good story, but I didn't get that emotional feel that you did, because that was just something. It was new to you. It was a new console. It was your first Final Fantasy. You just got those emotions that I'll never get. And that'll be the same thing with me in 9 and 12, you know?
Yes.
And so it's so interesting about that. But anything else you want to add?
No.
Okay. So, but that is the rivalry of these two characters in the culture. There was such a big split. People were Team 6, Team 7. To this day, if you look up the most top villainous people in Final Fantasy, they're always switched around. Sephiroth's number 1 or Kefka's number 1. Every time it switches. And when you talk about the top villains of all time, those two are always almost in the top 5.
And they alternate too, depending on the list too. Like, yeah, it's fun. It's very funny because you look at the IGN list, you look at GameSpot list, you look at Watch Mojo's list. It just no one can agree on which one's the better of the two.
Right. So let's take a break. Let our listeners kind of soak that in, and when we come back, we're going to start with our part 1 with Sephiroth, and then followed by that, we'll take another break, go by part 2 with Kefka, and then we'll talk about our future for those. And the future of those is going to be a quite interesting talk. So We'll be right back. Hey, this is Jeremy Evans, the man behind the In-Game Boss program, a network of gaming and other variety shows. But did you know I do my own show? Yeah, it's the Endgame Boss Podcast, a show where I challenge not only you, but myself on fun subjects in the gaming culture with fun guests. So come by and be challenged. And welcome back to the Gaming Hall of Rivalries. I'm your host, Jeremy Evans, and with the one and only Scism, and we are going to give you part one of this final episode. And what better yet is to talk about the one that made the most money, the most, villainous person for a while until Kefka came back into the map for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about Sephiroth. Let's talk about what made him so unique at the time. And Curtis, when you talk about, I want you to tell me also you personally, because Final Fantasy VII is your favorite Final Fantasy game.
When I saw Final Fantasy, like these two characters on the list, I was like, oh, hell yes.
Yeah, so as soon as you're done with your information, I want you to tell me and your listeners personally what made you love Sephiroth personally. Mm-hmm. And how was it in your voyage into that world? So
okay. So Sephiroth, he first appeared in Final Fantasy VII, which was in 1997. He came back in the spin-off movie Advent Children. He made 2 appearances in the Dissidia series, including the 3rd game in Dissidia NT as a playable character, and he is of course a hidden side boss, or a secret boss from Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. It is to be determined in 3, of course. Mm-hmm. The history of Sephiroth is, and I hope you get into this with Kefka, because they're both, in a sense, experiments. Mm-hmm. Sephiroth was born to 2 human parents, Professor Hojo and Lucrezia. Hojo, however, when he was working for Shinra, this electrical military company, they were researching what was called Genova cells. And the whole point of the Genova cells in their process for soldiers was to make super soldiers. So he injected Lucrezia with some Genova cells before Sephiroth was even born. Those, of course, formed to make Sephiroth. And from that, he was naturally gifted from birth with enhanced strength, enhanced speed, power, and very intellectual. I'd almost say very charismatic as well.
So for the listeners, he was basically a test subject ever since he was an egg.
Yes.
Okay.
And he was born with all these abilities. Mm-hmm. He's very socially smart and very manipulative. And the feats that Sephiroth does, and before I go into those feats, what is memorable about Sephiroth, even amongst the community, was he is such a slow build-up. The first time he's ever mentioned is the second Mako reactor destruction mission, and it's just such a throwaway line too, because Cloud's like, hey, Mr. President, we've met before, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember every man I've met unless you become like another Sephiroth. It's such a throwaway line too. You ignore it, and then it's like 30 minutes to an hour later, then it comes up again because Sephiroth has murdered entire floors of Shinra employees, and there's blood everywhere. It is literally a crime scene, but you still don't see him.
Right.
So you're like, man, this guy is freaking evil. And
so what you would say, you were about an hour into the game, or a couple hours in the game, you still haven't seen him yet?
Couple hours in the game, still had not seen him. You see the President Shinra, he's dead at his desk with this giant sword through him, impaled him on the desk, and they're like, oh, that's Sephiroth's sword. The second time Sephiroth is even brought up, you're crossing this little pond from the Chocobo farm to the Mithril cave, and you're running from this 70-foot Zolom, this 70-foot snake. If you fight it, it takes out your entire party. When you finally get a Chocobo right across the pond safely, there's a cutscene, and Sephiroth, Cloud, his Barrett, Tifa, or whoever's in your party, they come across that another Zolom impaled on a friggin' tree. And Barrett's or Tifa's like, who the heck did this? And Cloud's, oh, that was Sephiroth, man. Wait, so the thing that one-shot me when I'm at level 35, he did that to it? Okay, game, I'm good.
Right. Right.
You first meet Sephiroth, ironically, in a flashback. And you temporarily get control of him. At this time in the leveling, you might have Ice 2. You might have leveled your magic up to the second stage. Ice 2 or Blizzara. Fyra is Fire 2. Sephiroth has access to the third level of these spells. And he just one-shots all these enemies. That takes you... When you finally get to that place in Nibelheim, in the main storyline, it's taking you several hits. Sephiroth is one-shotting these things.
Right.
And he has revive magic. He has a cure 2. It's just very impressive. Like, you're thinking, oh, I hope I can get to that one day.
Right.
And so going into his feats, besides killing a giant 70-foot snake, he destroys the hometown of the Cloud, burns it to the ground, actually murders villagers in the town, murdered the president of Shinra, as well as a lot of employees. And a lot of people, it's very surprising too, because when you first play it through it, oh man, he's everywhere. He's meeting you on all sorts of places, like the Shinra ship, going to Junon, leaving Junon to the new continent, and he just flies away and stuff. Ironically, Sephiroth throughout the whole game does not do very much. He's actually trapped inside inside this cocoon at the North Crater. And you've actually been fighting are Genova shells that shapeshift into Sephiroth that still have his power and abilities.
Spoiler.
Yes, major spoiler there.
Now.
And his ultimate go-to, and this definitely differs from Kefka, but it's also similar because both him and Kefka despise humans to the very core. Kefka for very different reasons. Sephiroth, in his opinion, is that humans took the planet away from his mother, Genova. And Sephiroth has no idea about his birth parents. All he was told was, "Oh, your mother's Genova." And he loses his mind. And he's like, "I'm going to destroy every single one of you rotten things and retake the planet for myself." And his ultimate goal in the game, and huge spoiler, is to injure the planet and get absorbed into the life energy of the planet to corrupt it.
Okay. It's a fancy way of destroying the planet.
Yes. And there's a callback to this too, because after you defeat him, there's some remnant of him in the life stream. And that becomes known as the sickness and geostigma. That was addressed in the Crisis Core. When you have geostigma, you're coughing up this black stuff. You are not well at all. There's black spots all over you. You can infect other people. But because you have Genova cells in them, you're able to be manipulated by Sephiroth.
Okay.
And in this case, Sephiroth is there's a lot of really neat religious connotations throughout Final Fantasy. From Kefka's boss fight to Sephiroth being the one. I jokingly call it the Holy Trinity of Sephiroth and Advent Children, because you have 3 characters that call it remnants: Kadaj, Laz, and Yazoo. Each one of them represents an aspect of Sephiroth. Kadaj is the evil, hatred, and rage of Sephiroth. Laz is the strength of Sephiroth. Yazoo was the charisma.
Weren't they also kind of included in the Crisis Core one that was on the PSP? Weren't they mentioned in that one at all?
No.
They were not, okay.
And going into what makes, and I'm not sure about Kefka, but the bond between Sephiroth and Cloud is very interesting, because a lot of the things that Cloud does, it's because he's being manipulated by Sephiroth. He learned how to manipulate Genova cells. And if you're in Soldier, you got a needle full of this stuff to get enhanced strength and stuff. So he treats Cloud like a puppet.
Right.
I'm not sure what Kefka's done, but the thing that personally stands out to me for Sephiroth is he kills he kills Eris. To this day, that always gets to me.
Yeah, that got a lot of people. I was wondering if you're gonna get
so okay. In 1997, up to that point, characters just did not die. Characters did not die in video games. You could revive them, you could bring them back, or Mario just had extra lives.
Yeah,
you could, or in Final Fantasy, you just throw them a phoenix down. But no, your party mate, your white mage dies in the first disc. Maybe 5 hours in of this, or 5 to 7 hours in. It is traumatizing too.
It was a shock too.
It was a shock because what would you say? Middle school was when you played it, or I played it in middle school. I played it in 7th grade.
I didn't play till after high school,
and it just, so you imagine yourself as a 14-year-old kid, naive to the world, and you just lost someone. It's not even a real person, but you're just bawling and too. And I know 6 has a really sad scene too, but that just didn't happen. That was the first introduction to a JRPG for a lot of Western kids. And it was just heart ripped out.
And it sucks because it got ruined for me because people talked about Final. That's the thing about popularity games. People love a popular game so much that they can ruin that experience for overly hyping you. So when they told me you have to play it, it's great. There's a part that will make you cry. I wish they never gave me the information. Like, dude, you just need to play it and then come talk to me when you're done. Because then maybe I would have been thrown off as you. But now that I got hype about it, I was already prepared to like, where's this moment they're talking about? Yeah. And then it was still sad, but I didn't get that moment. Probably, I don't know. Some people teared up. Yeah. I didn't get the tear up part, but you could have teared up.
Oh, I teared up.
Yeah. So
and it's a good story because this was pre-voice acting. This was pre-voice performance in Final Fantasy games. You're reading dead text with these 3D models, and it's like, man, did it create a powerful moment?
Right.
And it is very memorable for a lot of, I'd say, millions of kids.
Oh yeah.
That are now adults.
Oh, yeah. Can I say that one of the things that definitely stand out to me was when you figure out a lot of information during that scene. For one, you lose a character no matter what. But what got me the point was how long that sword was. You really didn't know how long that sword really was until she got stabbed. Because you get to see what that full length of that sword is. That's
when he jerks it out of her back.
Yeah.
It just keeps going.
Yes, that's what's the part of it. Like, that's the thing that stand out a lot about Sephiroth. No other character at the time had a sword as long as that and so unique. And the fact he wielded like it was nothing. That was so crazy at the time.
The other first, and this is in 7 in general and kind of related to Sephiroth, I have never seen a main character more mentally broken and shattered as Cloud.
Yes.
Before. Due to actions or side actions of a villain. Sephiroth actually forces Cloud to hand him the materia that ends the world. That Cloud can't control himself. He can't control his ambitions. And going back to Eris's death, Sephiroth almost made Cloud do it.
Right.
Like, as Cloud, you're raising up the Buster Sword about to decapitate poor Eris, and you stop yourself at the last second. And Sephiroth's like, fine, I'll do it myself, disobedient puppet.
Right. Right.
It's such a shock too, but yeah, he forces the main hero of the game to hand him the very thing that puts the world in plague or in danger. And after that scene at the North Crater, Cloud F's off for about 2 hours. And when you finally find him, he is in a comatose Mako coma. His memories are all jumbled up. He doesn't know who he is. And that's a whole nother talk about Cloud, but it messed him up.
One of the things was very unique about just the Final Fantasy VII and Sephiroth, because this happened, and it was the only game at the time that did this before 6 got a new like a remaster treatment, and not like fully 3D, but just a new treatment. But was the cutscenes. Sephiroth had some really memorable cutscenes, and then because remember, SNES cartridges could not. They had cutscenes, but they were in game. We're talking about full cutscenes like you would see in like a movie cutscene. And one of the highlights was when Sephiroth burned down that village. You just saw him turn around with the giant flame of fire by him. That was a very iconic thing because you just right there represent like this is who Sephiroth is.
Oh, and what the choir is saying in the background too is so haunting.
That was another thing too.
Before anyone corrects me too, Sephiroth of course appeared in the PSP exclusive Crisis Core, where Zack Fair was the main character. Sephiroth also has a really cool scene in that too, and you really get to see how powerful he is in that game as well. Before he goes batshit insane evil, he's a good guy at this time. He is sparring with 2 first-class soldiers. They are the same rank as him, fighting him 2-on-1 on top of the Judon cannon. And he is messing around. He's not even using both hands to dual wield his long 7-foot sword, holding them off with just one hand, and he is just toying with both of them. The second that Genesis starts getting serious, Sephiroth is still toying with him.
Right.
And it is such a cool cutscene because, you know, Genesis is going all out. He's using magic. He traps Sephiroth in this fireball, this giant fireball DBZ attack where all the shots are coming in from all directions. Sephiroth is just deflecting it. And he breaks out of it. And the cannon, he cuts the cannon in half with his sword, and he just falls down, and then the one-winged angel theme starts kicking in, and he just whoops Genesis.
The fact that Sephiroth was so popular is the fact that you had a follow-up movie, Advent Children, that came after, where they were trying to have Sephiroth be resurrected.
Yes.
By, I forget what the 2 characters were in the game were, but they were 2 people that I believe where they also had the Genova in them, and they were trying.
Oh, those were the remnants, the 3.
Okay, yeah. They were also trying to resurrect him back too, and so.
And if the Crisis Core cutscene and Advent Children definitely shows how powerful he was. Very visually appealing, very impressive too. The other, and the elephant in the room with Sephiroth, when you talk about Sephiroth, you have to talk about One-Winged Angel. That final boss fight too against Sephiroth. He has 3 forms.
One of probably the longest fights in an RPG.
Yes, I would say that it is a 3-staged battle. He has 3 different forms. His final form, I think it was called Safe. No, it's not called Safe for Sephiroth. But he has angel wings. He's flying like a god with a halo behind him, and you're fighting in the heavens essentially. And you just hear this. Before that fight even loads, it's a black screen, and you hear this god choir, bottom.
And just before you go into that, let me tell for the listeners, if you have never played this game, but if you play Kingdom Hearts, you will see Cloud with a black wing,
yes,
on one side, and then Sephiroth has another black wing on one side. That's what he's trying to tell you in that form. Go on, I'm sorry.
And too, like, you know, going back to the religious part of it, Sephiroth was like the perfect child, but he's almost like a fallen angel. In that sense of with the one wing, it like got clipped, and he's trying to reattain that power in a sense. So you're fighting him. He's so powerful too. In that final fight, the God Choir is going of One-Winged Angel. One-Winged Angel is about 4 minutes 15 seconds long on a constant loop. It is probably one of my favorite Nobu Uematsu's tracks.
Okay.
Nobu Uematsu, if you do not know. He was the lead composer from Final Fantasy 1 all the way to Final Fantasy 9. That's almost 20 years. And he was a consultant on 10 soundtrack. One-Winged Angel has been redone, modernized with live orchestra, live choir. It's definitely a good listen to. If you've ever played a Kingdom Hearts and fought Sephiroth, that's what plays in all of his background appearances and battles. Going into the actual boss fight, he summons a meteor. It is a minute cutscene?
Yeah, you can't skip it whatsoever.
You can't skip it. He summons this comet from the far reaches of space, outside of coming through the Milky Way, our solar system. And it just starts going through planets. Takes out poor Pluto, takes out Uranus. Melts the ring around Saturn.
It almost sounds like it was on standby. He said, just in case I need you, I'm going to have you float right over there until I need you. Like, okay, I need you. All right.
Punches a hole through Jupiter, and when it finally hits it hits the sun, it passes the Earth, and it causes this giant solar explosion of the sun that hits the Earth, your party on Earth, and you take almost 7,000 damage. Like, you are in the critical red. You like need to heal everybody right now.
Right. It's one of those fights where you have to really be prepared, because once you start, you can't get out of it. And that was the toughest thing about it, because you can one mistake and you do not want to start over again. You know what I mean? It was like, I think that also set the bar of other future games, because 8 did that, 9 did that, of you got to be prepared, because these fights has like part 1, part 2, part 3.
Yes. Going into really quickly, Dissidia, you actually get to play as Sephiroth. He is a playable character on the villain side. Using that sword, he swings and it hits you like 16 times. Just one swing. He is so unbalanced with him. You have such a long reach with that sword.
Right.
And you do, of course, have his iconic meteor attack.
So before we take another break, you personally, how do you feel about Sephiroth and how he affected you when you played this game?
My gosh, hitting back onto Eris, at that point, game characters just did not die, and Eris felt so real, so human, such a good person, and just wham, gone. She never has a line after getting stabbed. She is dead.
Did he give you? And because I think villains have to, you're a good villain if they motivate you that you want to kill him. Did that motivate you to? I want to kill this guy.
Yeah.
I think a good villain is a person like, I like you because you're making me hate you.
And in that scene too, he is just like looking at Cloud in amusement. It's like, why are you even feeling these things? You don't have emotion. Like he definitely thinks of Cloud as a puppet at that point.
Right. Like, do your job.
Yeah, your job is to do what I say.
Yeah, or I'll make it worse for you. And I think that's what it looked like too. He was like, you're resisting. Okay, I'm going to keep doing these things until you do what I say.
Why Sephiroth is so memorable to me too is going back to when you actually first meet him, like the physical body of Sephiroth. All this whole time, it finally clicks. He was never there. And he did all of that through using Genova cells, manipulating people, and he very much reminds me of what Sosuke Aizen is today. That villain that doesn't have to lift a finger.
Where is he from for the listeners?
Oh, Sosuke Aizen is the main antagonist from Bleach.
Okay.
And Sephiroth is that kind of ultimate, that mastermind that I should not have to lift a finger to deal with you.
Right.
Okay, fine. I'll finally do something.
Right.
And it's just devastating when he does.
So, for people that haven't played Final Fantasy VII, hopefully this didn't spoil you. But if this still interests you, we recommend you playing it. We will talk about the future of that, because I'm pretty sure we know what's going on in the future, what's going on in the future of it. But we're gonna put our input into that. But if you haven't had a chance, it is an old game. It's almost on every single console. It will be on Xbox and the Switch coming out this year.
Yes.
For 2019. So we just recommend you give it a try, see what you think. Or if you want to, you're welcome to wait for the other thing that had been announced. So, Curtis, is there anything else you want to add before we end it?
And that's it.
Okay. So that's the end of part 1. And when we come back, we'll begin into part 2, the game that came before Final Fantasy VII, a person that is just as evil in his own way. We'll be right back.
I'm your Dream City Saint Nom Tran.
And I am your time-traveling analyst, Jeremy Evans.
We're proud to present to you a new show to the Endgame Boss program, where we watch movies that we love, we hate, and that we hadn't seen before.
As we take you on a journey through the present, the 2000s, the 90s, the 80s, and further back.
So let us take you back to the future.
We did it!
Yeah, we did it! High five!
No, stop that. Stop that. And welcome back to part 2 of this final episode of Gaming Hall of Rivalry, we are talking about Sephiroth and Kefka. So it's time for Kefka. What can I say about Kefka that we couldn't compare to Sephiroth? Well, Sephiroth is more of a person that, you know, he was more emotional. He was a very emotionalist is tough, right? Because like he's emotionless until you hit something that really hurts him, and then he finally gets emotion, and you see how powerful he is as emotion. Kefka, in some ways, just didn't care. He was a guy that like, I'm the best, and if you disagree with that, I will destroy everything about you. And that's basically him in a nutshell. He was a character from Final Fantasy VI in 1994 when it got released, and he was a character that was basically a psychopath. He was a psychopath that led to the apocalypse. And when you play Final Fantasy VI, or you're looking at Final Fantasy VI, one thing is different is it's more set up like a play. You had a part 1 and you had a part 2. And the way he ended part 1 was you continuing the repercussion of his event for part 2. Mm-hmm. And that was so different at that time, because most of the time you never got a think of it as Final Fantasy VII. You're going through all that, the whole destruction and everything like that. But what if Sephiroth did destroy it? Then part 2, you're playing off of what he did after. Mm-hmm. That's nuts. We have never played a game where playing the after effect.
Where the villain has almost won.
Yeah. Most of the time you're fighting to prevent everything happening. Now you're playing the part. What do we do after this? Like, we still got to stop him. And he's known as the Jester. People call him basically the Joker of Final Fantasy. He looked like a Joker. He acted like a Joker. But one of the things he wanted to do was he wanted to be God. That was his big thing. Like, Sephiroth was not trying to be a god. He was just trying to fix the world the way he thinks the world's going to be fixed.
To mother's will.
Yeah. Kefka wanted just to be a god. He just wanted to be more powerful. Because to me, personally, something about him, he said it wasn't enough for him. Like, where he was at the beginning, he was like, this isn't enough. I need more power. I want to be the best. I want to do this.
What's really funny about Kefka is he is a through and through a nihilist.
Yes.
That does not believe in anything.
Yes.
And when you're dealing with someone like that, they are unpredictable. They are very dangerous.
It's funny too, because he just takes life as a joke, but at the same time, no pun intended, but at the same time, it almost feels like when you play the game that he knows that the world he's in is not real. That's why I'm going to have fun with it.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of interesting? It's kind of like if you know you're just a video game, you're like, or you know you're in a dream. Like, I know this is a dream. I can do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's how I feel like he takes this. Now, you know, Curtis mentioned all the games that Sephiroth been. Kefka's been Space Demon. He's in Dissidia. Yeah, you know, he has been featured in a bunch of games, not as much as other games. The only reason is because Kefka would be too hard to put in. You couldn't put Kefka in Kingdom Hearts. He would just destroy everything. This is be pointless.
What's really unique about Kefka and his design is when you look at Final Fantasy villains prior to him, with the exception of the Cloud of Darkness from 3, they were these big guys in armor. They were these big knight figures. You had the Emperor from 2, and then you have a Jester too, just randomly sprinkled in.
Right.
And it's so funny. The opening cutscene to Dissidia is you see all these big guys in armor. You see scrawny Sephiroth, who's tall, and you see a clown just kind of floating there.
Right.
And it's such an unassuming villain.
Right. Because if you just look at the cover or just look who he is, you wouldn't think he's very threatful.
No.
He just looks like a goofy character. Okay, whatever. But when you go into it, you're just like, oh my goodness, this guy is nuts. And when they tried to create Kefka, they were trying to create a character at the time that was real and alive. Mm-hmm. And I think they did a good job with that, because I think that he's the one that really started to show that you can have a villain that can just be totally psycho, that can actually destroy the world and make you realize that, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to win this, but I can't. I don't know. It makes you second guess where the story was going to go. And that what made it so unique. So that they wanted to do that. And they were saying that they didn't want a character to be kind of more of a boring character, because most of the villains that we know from the past Final Fantasy were
very one-dimensional.
Yeah, very black generic, and white too. Very generic, very buff, like you said, armor. They were supposed to be more scary looking than more of the personality to supposed to be scary. And they're trying to show that looks can be deceiving. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did I think he's the one that set the template of all the other characters not wearing armor anymore. They were just more of using the mind and brains to do it. Sephiroth didn't wear that much armor. The character from 8,
Ultimisia did not. Ultimisia definitely didn't wear armor.
Yeah. I think it's Kuja from 9 didn't do that. 10, no. None of these characters, they stopped wearing armor. It was more of their personality were the villain side. So Kefka, I think, set that bar up of like, we don't need to be in armor to scare you. Yep. I'm gonna let my mind scare you. And then when you were talking about magic earlier, in this story, Kefka was the first human in that world to craft magic. And because he was experimental, and that's the funny thing. Yeah. And the funny part about it is that Sephiroth was a test subject. And Kefka was testing magic. He was testing things. And the fact that he tests stuff messed with his mind.
Yep.
That's where he realized that not only that it screwed up his mind, but it showed him like, I created something that no one can do. And I can use that to manipulate people and do what I say. And even like give them the powers. But then I know I can control that once I give them the powers. Hence the main character, you find out that she was experimental super soldier. Hence where we get to Final Fantasy VII, we're super soldiers. So that definitely got influenced by that of I can make these test subjects, give them the power of capturing these espers and mating them to create these characters. Hence Terra was created.
Kind of going back to the
being enslaved.
The communities too, because these are the two back-to-back games that went away from the high fantasy magic in that sense. It was definitely a war of science versus magic in 6 and 7.
Yes. And the fact that Kefka, he was a non-stopping killing machine. So much of just, what's my mission? You want me to go to this kingdom? All right, I'm going to destroy it. Go. There was one point where he was in battle with one of the nations in the game. I believe it was called the Nation of Dorm, I believe. And he was so irritated and bored about the fight that he decided that, you know what? I'm just going to poison your water and kill everybody that way. And the fact that it's smart, but also scary at the same time.
It's almost something you'd read from The Art of War.
It's more of like he can think so much outside the box, and that's so much scary instead of more like, okay, we're just going to charge until he gets tired. No, he's like, nah. I'm getting lethal so much that his kingdom did not kingdom of and I'm sorry, I might be pronouncing this wrong, but it was the kingdom of Emperor Casal, but he didn't approve his method and put him in prison for it. He's like, no, you went way too far. Like he, and it's funny too because I think Kiva look at it as like, a death is a death. It doesn't matter how I do it. You wanted this, I'm going to give it to you. But he knew that Kefka could overthrow him. I think that's what scared him about poisoning the water and all that stuff. He's like, he can destroy me.
If he did that to them.
Yeah, I think I created a bigger monster. He's getting way too powerful. I think, personally, I got to stop him, And the goal was they were collecting these entities, these statues, and creating these statues would create this super ability power to give them a chance to take over the world. And Kefka was more of like, oh, I want that for myself. Bump this. I want this for myself. And he ended up, killing the emperor and using entities to become a god. And in the first half of it, he ends up really destroying almost everything. And it leaves the cast in the second half to find a way to get to Kefka now.
What was it called? The World of Run?
Yeah. And so now the funny part about this is when Curtis was talking about Sephiroth had a lot of emotional problems. So there was a lot of stuff to talk about him. But Kefka, there's not a lot talked about him personally because he told you straight up in the beginning, this is who I am. This is who I'll be. Try to stop me if you can. There was one scene they talk about. He was in the desert and he had one of the soldiers swipe his boots because he said, They're dirty. They're dirty. Swipe it for me. Right there indicates like who he is. This is who I am. This is what I am. You disagree with me, I destroy you. In the story, when Terra escaped the village where she was being controlled or being told to go destroy, he went ahead of time and destroyed the village where she was from. Like, I burned it. You should not run me. You shouldn't escape from me. I'm sorry. So like. That's why it's tough to say who's evil, but they're so evil in their own way. Like Kefka was just so evil because the fact that you couldn't stop me. You couldn't. And I'm proving it to you. Unlike Sephiroth, is more of like, I did this because you guys didn't want me. You guys didn't do what I told you to do.
Yeah.
And now it brings my emotions out. And you're doing this to hurt somebody I care about so much. Even though like he was brainwashed to believe that.
Yeah.
It's almost crazy that you could even.
I wouldn't even say brainwashed. He just lost his mind.
I guess in that way, but it's almost to the point that you could even. It's so crazy. You can make a theory that Kefka could have been Genova in some sort of way. Like he could have like lost his ability of the godlike powers and became this thing. They picked up his scraps and turned him to a Genova and told Sephiroth, and he's like, I'm just throwing it out there. It won't, but that could have been a fun theory. The fact that I always think in Final Fantasy, they always leave something behind and they use that to the next thing. And how awesome would it be if Final Fantasy were all connected in some sort of way, like something there got influenced to the second one that just somehow turn Final Fantasy 2 the way it is. And it'd be so cool if 6 was somehow influenced 7 the way it was. Like Sephiroth was finishing what Kefka could not do. Now, I don't want my listeners to go and do research and tell me, Jeremy, that would never know. No, it's just a fun theory.
Put down the pitchforks, guys.
Yeah, it's just a fun. It would just be a fun theory of why these two characters are so rival against each other. And it just blows my mind. And I don't want to talk too much about the story or what he's done because one, it's almost too much of his own language. You really have to play that game to really understand who he is.
If you want a modern day contemporary example of Kefka's personality, I would say Heath Ledger's Joker in that sense. Going back to the boots, the only reason why Kefka said, hey, my boots are dirty is because I know you guys are so stupid. You will drop everything and start wiping my boots. And I hate you because you're that stupid. Yeah. And the Joker's sense of all this stuff here, it's stupid. We're all animals. Like that kind of just, there's no natural good in people. We're all, when the chips are, what was it? When the chips are down, they'll turn on you too. Yeah.
And that's the way he looked at it from that point, right? That's why they told what he was, where he was talking about like, nothing matters. Nothing matters. Like, you can sit here and believe all you want. You can do all this stuff, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's meaningless.
The other scary thing about Kefka, too, is he did not care if he even won, too.
Right. He just wanted to see how far he can go. And to that's an awesome villain to me because the stuff he did. Now, I mentioned before with Sephiroth that he was a great villain because you hate him.
Yes.
So you hate him with what the stuff he did, and you want to destroy him. This is a different kind of hate. This is more of a hate that he can destroy everything, and I have to stop him. And it's not because I hate him for that. It's just more of like,
you need to.
I need to. I got to stop him.
Sephiroth, when he killed, it's like you want to just go at him.
Yeah.
And I like what you brought up. It was like with Kefka, it's just like, well, this is for the greater. We need to do this.
Right. And the fact that you saw a little taste of his stuff in the first act shows like, this is him just trying. Like, this is him just giving this a try. It's kind of like, I just want to test this. And the fact, like, holy crap, he did a lot of stuff in his first test. Okay, now what happened if he's really taking this seriously? And that's just scary. And because of these two games, we haven't seen anybody hit those top tiers yet. 8 didn't do it. 9 didn't do it. 10 didn't do it. 12, which was my favorite, no way in hell got near that thing. 13 didn't do it. 15 kind of did it.
I was about to say I'm gonna fight you there.
Like,
get 90 seconds. The most contemporary thing about 15 was Arden Izunia was such a wonderful callback to a kind of a merger between Sephiroth and Kefka. Arden had the same kind of personality. He had this really tremendous dark evil side, and he would mask it with a very laissez-faire, hobo look. Dressed like a hobo, you'd never assume he was the villain till the very end. He did something very bad to one of your party members by his actions, kill someone close in the party, and that kind of harkens back to Sephiroth, leaves the world in ruin. Absolute darkness. The actual chapter is called World of Ruin, like a nice callback to Final Fantasy VI. And very much like Kefka, he does not care if he wins or loses. He even thinks like, hey, if I die now, I'm still going to win. because you guys are. I still kill Noctis. He has to follow me into the afterlife to kill me, and even if I lose there, I've killed the King of Lucia. I've ended his reign, his family's reign. And that's very much like Kefka. Like, Kefka did not give a shit if he won or lost.
The difference is, though, between... The difference between these two characters and the one in Final Fantasy 15 is the fact that these two characters showed you... Sephiroth and Kefka did a good job at the very beginning to show you a little bit of who they are.
Yes.
Sephiroth was word of mouth until you finally saw him. Kefka showed you at the very beginning. The difference between
Arden's a sleeper. Arden is an absolute sleeper.
And the reason, and that's dangerous sometimes, because if you hold him back too far,
then
the
you
climax,
can lose focus.
The climax doesn't hit hard,
or it feels rushed.
Yes. So that was the tough part. I feel like that 15 is on the right track, and I hope 16 will hit that perfectly. But he was a good villain.
My last thing on Arden is I really wish he was brought up a bit earlier.
Yes.
But man, was he such a love letter to both of those characters.
Yes. And so that is a very interesting about these two characters. So it's time to get to the final part and our final episode topic, the future of these two characters. So let's go ahead and do 6 first, because I think 6 is going to have the shortest. 6 to me is such an honorable rivalry of this and Final Fantasy 7 that 7 has been getting the best treatment I can think of any Final Fantasy.
Yes.
And, I say well-deserved, but at the same time, it's more like, we get it.
But it's on the back of 6.
Yes.
Sadly.
It's time for a full, remastered, redone, 3D up-res of Final Fantasy 6. It's time for it. It's time for it to get its own treatment. It deserves it. Like 8 is getting a treatment. They announced. But 6, why is 6 getting so left behind? I'm sorry. I know we want to keep the classics, but I can imagine just seeing that beautiful graphics that we have, to see this fantasy world.
Yes. Modernized.
Yes. And it'll just be so cool to just see Kefka in a 3D realm.
It's going to be the same reaction when Sony in 2003 did a tech demo of the PlayStation 3, and they did the opening bomb mission sequence from 7 on the next gen system. People lost their shit. They were so excited, and they're like, "Oh, this is a tech demo." It's like, "Oh my gosh!"
Right. It was a huge slap in the face.
And when I came in with my research, and Jeremy asked me, "How did your research go for this episode?" And the first thing I brought up was like, 6. When you look at it to an uninformed person, it's almost like a cult classic, because they didn't sell us well as 7. It just kind of, but it's so popular.
It is. It's so popular, and yet it needs to get in more people's hands. Because a lot of people, the new generation of gaming, are going to have the hardest time going back to the retro library. Yes, it's been on some retro consoles like, the SNES Classic and all that stuff, but we need a full 3D one and a new modern, so we can just give people a chance to really know this is the one that set off the fuse of where the Final Fantasies are going now.
This was like the game changer.
Yeah, this was the game changer.
Yep.
Yeah. So I really want that. I really want to see them go all out, making Kefka more evil than what they showed him in there. I don't care, man. I don't care.
Cast Mark Hamill.
I was gonna say, like, get Mark Hamill to come do it. I don't care. I really just want to hear a crazy guy talk again and just get that. What we miss so much about Final Fantasy, people are demanding. I think people are demanding that for so long. So that's what I want. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. The Dissidia games are a great entry. Like, if you want to see Kefka in the more modern sense, play Dissidia. Play Dissidia 1 or 2 on the PSP if you have a PSP.
Or NT.
Or NT.
On PS4.
But definitely the PSP ones on Dissidia actually had a story mode, and there were some really good cutscenes with Kefka, and you got to see his nihilistic point of view on things too.
Right. I can just picture seeing an awesome cutscene of him just doing a giant speech about what he thinks of life.
Just blow it all up.
Yeah. That would just be so jaw-dropping. It's like, holy crap. It's one of those things where the pin drop, like, you're listening.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're going to miss something very important. So Final Fantasy 7. So everybody knows that since I think 2000 and I want to say 15. 7 has been announced.
The remake was announced.
People lost their minds because that was the same year Shenmue 3 got announced. So everybody lost their minds. And it's been going through so many different production ideas.
Almost in production hell in a sense, because they had a CyberConnect too, the Naruto guys working on some mechanics, and then Square's like, oh nope, we're just gonna keep it all in house.
Yeah. And from there, it was a debate on it was going to be episodic, with these different chapters we're going to go in. The turn-based is turning into an active, more turn-based, like Kingdom Hearts.
With the reception of 15's combat system, it's definitely going to be very similar to 15.
Yeah.
And I am all for that.
Yeah. And then but on top of that, now they're talking about, it might go back to a full game. We don't know what is going on here. And to me, I understand they want to do episodic of the game, but to me is more of that is really hard and a lot of money for people to invest in this. You're paying to enjoy experiments bit by bit. Now, I don't know how many episodes are going to be, and I don't know how many hours it's going to be. Maybe if they do a good 30 to 40 hour for the first episode, maybe, but you can't do a good 20 hours first episode. That's not even almost the first disc.
That's shameful.
Yeah,
almost.
that's not even the first disc. And if you spread this out to 10, you're gonna piss off a lot of people. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're better off just taking 7 to 10 years again, like you did with 15, and give them the whole package, and let's just move on with it. And to me, I'm happy that Final Fantasy VII is getting this chance, but at the same time,
it's almost sad.
It's almost sad. I really wanted just to get it done and we can move on because I really want to see something else.
I will quote a YouTuber, Jesse Cox on YouTube, loves Final Fantasy VI. And on the co-optional podcast when Total Biscuit was still alive, he was like, buy the shit out of this game. And it's like, well, Jesse, you love Final Fantasy VI. It's like, I know, but if 7 does really well, then they're going to reach back into Final Fantasy VI.
Yes.
And I kind of believe that too, because Square Enix is very open to what sells well. You look at the sales of 7, that was a very big launching point. The reception of 15 was like, well, maybe we should keep with the action-based kind of combat system.
I mentioned before, I think that's where they wanted to go ever since the beginning. We start seeing it very slowly. You can see it from 6 to 7, but the big one was from
what was it, 12 with the gamble system?
10 to 12, yeah, where you had people moving around but still turn-based action, and that was my favorite battle system. I think they've been doing that, but
10 was amazing. 10 was amazing too because you could switch party.
Yes,
like story-wise, they're all there. They are all there. Yeah, why am I not switching guys out?
That's the reason. I think they've been trying to get to that point because at the time they just didn't have the technology to do it, so they had to do a turn-based.
Yes.
But you start slowly. The more they got, the more they were trying to get more active and keep doing stuff. Kingdom Hearts was kind of that experimental, and I think then they inherited into the other ones.
Yes,
and stuff like that. And
I think 15's gonna act like a launch. 15 was almost a litmus of like what works, what works, what do we need to do with the direction of Final. Oh, this sold really well. And okay,
so personally for Final Fantasy VII for me, now. I'm probably in the side of because it's probably going to get burned out the stakes for this. But I really want Final Fantasy VII not to go completely straight by exactly what 7 did. I really want them to take a quick. I'm not saying change the story up, but change the way are you telling the story. Like I want Aerith is going to die. I'm fine with that.
Yes.
But give me something different how Aerith died. I don't want where she's back in that plateau and we see it coming. Give me a twist where we're like, she still dies, but shown away like, okay, that's a little different, but it still got to the point. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like I'll give you an example. Like, when Clough crashes into the church or something like that.
Yes.
Maybe it could be a different way how he crashed into a church. Or maybe the way they meet is a little bit different, but we're still getting to the point.
The way the Zack met Aerith in Crisis Core, it's just such a callback to falling through the roof.
Yeah.
Because he falls through the roof, it's like, oh, come on, Square. Really?
Yeah.
Twice in this poor woman's lifetime?
Right. I just want a little bit of a more twist and then cut some of the fat off that some of those have. Like, maybe we don't need... the motorcycle scene could be a little bit more developed, a little bit better. More streamlined, a little bit better, a little bit shorter to me. Traveling across the open world, of course, fast travel has to be absolute in this. If there's no fast travel, we Square needs to go back and fix themselves.
Yes.
But just getting to point A to point B to certain areas could be a little bit quicker to me. It'd be cool if we can slice off the quick cutscenes and just have the enemies just pop out at you. That's another thing too. No random. Just have the characters pop up.
The one concern I have with the open world and the size of Midgar, the size of you have continents in 7. You had continents in 15, but you were on one continent. the whole time, and
Yeah.
not even the whole continent too.
Right.
Is this giant area? In 7's world, the size of the map in 15, maybe not even a tenth that size.
Right.
Of that world.
Right. And it'll be interesting to also, too, for bonus stuff is create some new landmarks in the game that we didn't get a chance to do. Like maybe Crisis Core had a landmark in that world. It'll be cool to go see it in that in Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah, it's neat because, in Crisis Core, you actually got to explore more of Wutai.
Yeah.
Because you had actually an invasion mission in Wutai at the beginning of Crisis Core, and you never saw that stuff in 7 because there's no excuse because it's an island.
Right. Midgard, the beginning of the
Yes.
it'd be cool to explore that a little bit more. It was very limited where you had to go. It'd be really cool if we get more free roaming to go see what's going on, talk more with the townspeople, get more interactions. Maybe it'd be cool if there was I forgot if they were more straight on the mission, so they never really got time to really look around or anything like that. I was gonna say it'd be cool to be little side quests in there or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. Build the relationships in a different way. Like you can still build a relationship with cousins, but it'd be kind of cool if maybe you get choices that helps their relationship stronger, and maybe they make some moves stronger or something like that.
Yes.
I think that would be kind of cool. What is your input since you love this Final Fantasy? What is the most important things you want?
With 7, I'm very torn because I'm very hardline tradition. Like, it needs to be like this. This scene needs to be in there as well. And even the cross-dressing part, I love that scene. That's so funny. I'm not sure how well it will hold up in 2019, unfortunately. But Japan does not really give a care about that.
Right.
Which I love about Japan because Japan we do what we want.
Right.
You be you.
Right.
But, okay. Honestly, I do like the criticism on the motorcycle section. I think that felt a little too lengthy in the original. There's going to be some changes. I think that needs to be inevitable, too.
What do you feel about the final fight? Should that final fight be cut down a little bit more to you? Or should you be able to maybe go at it a different way?
The very final fight with Cloud and Sephiroth in the live stream, I think needs to be extended, and maybe you can cut some section from the different Sephiroth forms.
Okay. What about the backstories of these characters? Do you think they could be structured a different way? Like, maybe about Sid, maybe about Red 13, Yuffie. Yuffie just showed up. You don't get anything about Yuffie.
Yeah, and it's all optional, too, because they were optional characters.
Yeah.
I think maybe expand more on those two.
Vincent,
yes.
It'd be kind of cool if, if you go do a side story with them, like a venture, like, hey, come with me to do this. You might get a special thing about me.
The one benefit 7 has, I think that has over 6 is you've had so many spin-off materials. You've had Dirge of Cerberus, which had a lot of prequel stuff in it too, with Lucrezia and Vincent. You had an entire prequel PSP game in Crisis Core that you can pull history off of, as well to add in extra content.
I just think it'd be just so exciting, if you go with Vincent to go do something, maybe he gets a new transform or something. Come with me.
Yes.
It's kind of like helping them getting prepared for the final fight. It's kind of like finding, if you play Mass Effect, if you go do a special side mission with them, you get a special perk from them that will help. Maybe a new final super move or something they can do.
And a good example of adding to the lore is, so if you watch the original cut of Advent Children, the fight with Sephiroth and Cloud has it's missing a scene that was added in after Crisis Core released, because he actually has a conversation with Zack in his head, hey, you've done. Zack wasn't a thing then. Zack was never explored before Crisis Core, and they added about 30 minutes of content to that movie of Zack stuff or just other scenes into that movie.
Wouldn't it be cool if they flip it on us and at the beginning you play Zack a little bit to get the understanding, but maybe and this is silly, maybe it's silly, but it'd be kind of cool. You start playing with Zack, and then a transition happens, and then you turn in the Cloud and you continue the voyage.
Yes, that would be cool.
I thought that'd be really cool. Or maybe when he crashed down the church, Ares looks down and he sees Zack, but then she takes a double take and it's Cloud or something like that. That'd be cool. So you're making the memories,
mixing
the memories over.
And two, Square loves doing that. Square loves throwing allusions to previous games.
Mm-hmm.
There's an entire website about Final Fantasy references in Final Fantasy 15, and there's a whole list of, from this game this was mentioned, this game this was referenced and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Square just in general loves doing that. And I love when game companies take a nod to the previous titles in their work.
Mm-hmm. When this game finally get released and it's finally out, do you think, honestly, in your opinion, and it's a tough question because you don't know until you get it in your hands, but do you think this game is going to live up to what you were wanting it to be?
I think so.
Okay.
It's weird because my opinion is probably one of various different opinions. I've been waiting for this so long.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I was thinking back, oh man, the PS2's out, and then they do remakes. Man, they need to remake 7 on this modern.
I remember there was a giant petition. Everybody was talking about it. I remember at the PSX there was a fake out. They presented Final Fantasy 7 out on the big screen. They were like, oh my god! And it was like, no, it was a port.
Yeah,
and I was like, that was messed up. So, and then of course the tech demo was a big slap you in the face too.
A big cry for it too is when you look at the release dates of Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 8, it's not very far apart.
Mm-hmm.
And the character models in 8 are so sleek.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what happened here?
Right.
Oh, come on. Go back to 7, do that.
Right,
come on, guys.
and it's sad too because from 8 to 7 totally just made 6 disappear off the face of the map at that time. But like, remember 6, guys? That was a thing. That was a great game. And that's why it's so sad that like 6 is not getting the attention, because I think a lot of people need to realize that 6 really
was influential.
It was very influential to 7, and it deserves the same treatment.
And some of Uematsu's best music, people do say 7. I love 7's soundtrack, but 6 had some really good tracks.
Mm-hmm.
There was a whole opera in 6. A whole entire opera that he composed in one of the cutscenes.
It's almost tough. You feel like that was their final one. Like
that
felt like that was like their final one. Going like, if this don't do well, I don't know how the next one's gonna be.
But yeah, I cannot stress that there is a cutscene in 6 where you're doing stuff behind the scenes in the backstage of this opera play going on, and there's music composed for it. There's lyrics composed for it. And it's like, man, this poor guy who was just composing music now you're asking him to compose an opera now? It's
right.
Like, that deserves some love.
Right. But what about our listeners that have been on this voyage with us? Would you like to see a remastered or a redone Final Fantasy VI for this new modern time after 7 does come out? Do you think 6 is overrated? Do you think 7 is overrated? Just definitely email me at the ingameoffice@gmail.com. I will be putting this poll up and see what people really think of it. I hope you guys have a chance to listen to this episode. This is probably our longest and probably one of our best episodes. So best for last. But Curtis, I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me
on this voyage.
Been a fun voyage.
Yeah, I'm so glad that it got to the beginning to the end. This was about over 6 months.
It's been fun because real quick, there was a couple I met in Vintage Stock, and I started talking about the podcast to them, and they all of a sudden subscribed to the YouTube channel like quickly. And shout out to my friend Jesse Edgar, who's a friend on Facebook, and I know his wife, and he's a constant listener.
Oh, good. He enjoys the show?
Yes.
Good. So hopefully then he'll love this one.
Yes.
But the goal was just, Curtis and I, not only to give you guys fun information about these characters, because, some of these games you did skip over. I skip over them. But it was fun just to go into research and find out, because some of these games, information makes you want to go. I want to go play Final Fantasy VI. I do. I wish I played it before, but now talking about it, I really want to play because I really want to get the intel, a feeling of, what Kefka can really do and stuff. And you played a little bit of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know where you stopped at, but you got basically enough for like, this guy's nuts.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But I want to thank everybody for listening to the show and supporting. If this is your first episode for you, please go back. Start from the beginning or start from here and go backwards. Start anywhere and go from there. We recommend to it. It's a short series. It's only 14 episodes. It's not a waste of time. It's one of those things you can put it in your car on the way to work.
Yep.
That's the goal. The goal was to have this listen to your car while you're heading to a store or something. It should be done by the time you get home. That was the goal of it all. And, you know, there's more to the network. We have great other podcast shows. Curtis and I are not done. We have other projects that we're trying to work on. Hopefully we'll be sharing that more soon. But this is our very first show that ended for the network. And, you know, I want to thank everybody for showing their support and everything like that.
Thanks, guys.
And we will see ya.